That's good.
3 or 4.
Okay.
My mom had a ladies' aid meeting, and our fence to the road was about maybe 30 yards away, and we were wondering if anybody would come because dust was so blowing you could not see the fence 30 miles away. It was the dust.
Really?
And I don't remember if people came or not, but I remember my mom worrying about the ladies' aid meeting because of the dust.
Well, we have collected a group of people with very good memories because they remember things from 1-year-old and 2-year-old. So these folks, even though they lived through the Depression, they were very young. Some of you were born in the 30s.
Yeah.
We have Ted, who I would just have to say was born in 1929.
29, that's
Yep,
right.
yep. So what we'll talk about will be the Depression, the Dust Bowl, probably things that you heard your parents or other people talk about. So just as a review, there will be a test on this later, but they think that the Depression probably started with the stock market crash, 1929. There's some variability in thinking about that. Between 1929 and 1932, the worldwide gross domestic product fell by 15%. Compared to the downturn in 2008, it fell by 1%, so much different than that. The Dow Jones Industrial Average at that time dropped 25% versus 7% in 2008. So birth rates fell with people concerned about having enough money to feed and take care of children. And then, of course, in 1933, drought and erosion combined to cause the Dust Bowl. So if there's anything you want to mention that you remember about it, feel free to jump in at any time, but I'm going to ask a few questions as well to jog your memory. What year did the Smiths move to the Newton, Kansas area? What year did Ben and Carolyn move?
March 18th, 1947.
1947.
We arrived on location in Newton about 5 o'clock that afternoon. We had no electricity, no inside plumbing. Only the windmill had water, so we carried everything inside.
Okay, and then Dewey Allen, I believe was your brother, passed away.
Alan Dewey.
Alan Dewey, sorry about that. Born in 1929, I believe. And what did he die from? Do we know?
We believe he,
Pneumonia, I think, but I'm not real positive of that.
I thought Mom said it was a blood deficiency or something. We only surmised years later that it might have been leukemia or something like that, but he was about 9 months old
Okay.
So he was born right after Melinda then.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
that's right.
Melinda was born in
27.
27. Yeah. Okay. Do you recall that Grandpa and Grandma Smith worried or talked very much about money during the Depression, the Great Depression? Is that a topic of discussion that you remember?
Yes, there was, I remember Dad talking about selling eggs for 3 cents a dozen. At one point he had bought or paid down on a farm, piece of land. I don't know where that land was. Never thought to ask him about that, but he had paid $9,000 down on that land. And then during that depression, he was not able to make the payments, so he lost everything. And that was kind of a milestone that helped him to focus on getting the family secured with everything that we could possibly do for ourselves. Like we raised our own beef, we raised our own pigs, we raised own chickens. Grain was milled, as Aaron talked about earlier, with the flour, made clothes out of the sacks and so on.
So to clarify, they put money down on a farm that they were living on, but they lost that during the
That's
Depression
right.
because they couldn't make the payments.
They could not make
They
it.
would have rented then, but by race to the owner of it, or to the bank.
It went back to the bank. It was a bank loan that they had.
And you know what they did then? Did they move elsewhere, or how does? Who
You know,
knows?
I don't remember him saying
Yeah.
anything about that. No.
Let's see. Did you know of other families who lost their farms and during that time, or is that a more unique experience, you think?
Oh, I don't think that was unique, but it was just something that they dealt with as a family personally.
I thought it was, as Dad often said, it was tough. They were tough times, to quote his term. It was tough time, and he said, did like that on his knee. He said, we didn't have nothing.
That's right. My grandpa lost his homestead that same year in North Dakota. So that was all the way from Oklahoma to North Dakota, drove all the way through here. So, and the same thing happened.
Lost it because he couldn't make
Couldn't pay
payments.
the payments on the day, yeah.
Yeah.
Then it went back to the state. So when my dad then rented it, then he paid percentage of the income to the bank, because the bank owned it.
Okay. And then Jim has some questions about jobs and responsibilities and just some random things. Whose job was it to milk the cows?
4 brothers and my own mom. We had usually 20 to 24 head that we milked twice a day.
Wow.
And I remember we milked, I think you and I and Will and Ben each milked 4. And then sometimes when we were in harvest or other times plowing or working, then Mom would come and help us. But we milked 20 each day.
And how about tending the chickens? Is that a community affair or?
Yeah,
Yes.
that was always part of the whole list of chores that we had to do. Yeah.
Can I have a question? When the milk came in, did you sell the cream or did you sell the milk as a whole?
Sold the cream first, mostly, and the skim milk, as we called it then, that's separated,
Right,
that went for the hogs.
yeah,
Hogs
yeah,
and the young calves.
yeah,
Yeah,
same
young
thing,
birds.
yeah.
The young calves.
I think of Mom having to go out and milk cows when she had the charge of the cooking in the house for the family. Now, I think the boys had to help sometimes with the cooking and
We
dishes.
helped at different things, but not generally. If there was farm work, we were out there, the girls
right.
were in the house.
But see, it was just Melinda
Yeah.
for those years.
Gardening, preserving the food, how did that work? Was
Always.
that everybody or?
Always a big garden.
Yeah.
Always big. I can remember one time we carried 30 bushels of potatoes down the basement in that old farmhouse. A large garden. There were always a lot of tomatoes, and I can still smell the tomato juice.
You don't like tomatoes, that's the
I know
problem.
how it smelled.
And there was big canning. The women at the end of the summer would brag most on how many cans of beans and how many jars of beans and stuff. So that was a big item in the family.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then as far as going to school, did the older boys go off to school or did they stay and work on the farm?
The first 2 weeks of September, we stayed on the farm, even
There
though
they go.
school was in session.
Yeah.
No matter what age we were, we always stayed home those first 2 weeks to sow wheat and prepare the ground. for
Farming
sowing.
was first.
Yeah, that's
Farming was
right.
first, yeah.
That was always first. And then when we got to school, then we caught up.
Yeah,
Yeah. Some of the administrators in schools didn't like that too much.
yeah.
We walked from the home diagonal across to the school. It was a half a mile north and a half a mile east to the school. And if you could walk through the creek, through the pasture, through the neighbor's land, we could walk right straight to the school. But sometimes after school was out, we would walk the road because it was easier walking.
My thought is back to the canning.
Yeah.
One of you said Mom didn't put much sugar like in the canning of the peaches, so when she served it, Dad would put a whole bunch of sugar on.
I can
But
see
I
it.
think, it didn't, she was doing so much canning, it would take a lot of sugar. She didn't use a lot of sugar. And then when they were served, maybe they had a little more sugar at that time than they had it,
Yeah.
Because at canning time, it would be all at once, using so much sugar.
Sugar was rationed. Yeah, later on.
Yeah, and during the
Yeah.
war, I remember, sugar and rubber tires. Those two things I
they were-
remember
And
rationing.
we had ration,
Really, you remember that?
what do you call
Cards, ration cards.
them? Ration cards.
In fact, Marlene still has I think in our possession, I don't know if you've done
Yeah,
away with it,
no, I haven't.
a ration card that she was designated,
Well,
you know,
it's
as a
booklet
child.
with the coupons in it.
Yeah, just a coupon.
She gives it to you to use occasionally?
Well, it's in case we get into hard times now.
Yeah,
I'll dig it out.
yeah.
And
Now-
sugar came in little capsules, little, what did we call them?
I don't know.
Sugar lumps?
They weren't
We had
so-
sugar lumps as
They
well.
were little pills. And saccharin, that's what.
Yeah, we didn't have any.
Saccharin, in the morning when we had breakfast
I
with
imagine,
milk on, we put saccharins in and stirred it till it dissolved.
well, I imagine because sugar was rationed.
Yeah.
Well,
I can't imagine that.
sugar and tires, they
As
were
far
not
as-
available.
As far as working, did the children stay on the farm to work, or did you go off the farm to get other jobs to help bring in money?
In Oklahoma, I think we just worked on the farm, as I remember. We cultivated with the horses, 2-row Dick and Nig, a white one and a black horse, a mule. And they were Dick and Nig. And we would, I know Will, he drove the horses and would whip them, and sometimes they got off the row and we hoed the corn. We cultivated the corn out, and it was on if Dad ever could see us, we'd be in trouble. But you couldn't help it. I mean, you couldn't always keep them horses going down the road correctly.
You'd think you're drunk, huh?
Did you keep any bees? Did you, any
I
beehives?
don't think so.
No, we never had any bees that I know of.
Yeah, yeah. Let's see.
There's someone else said here today, we always had, the garden, always had a large garden. And, we always could raise our own vegetables and,
And meat and eggs.
meat and eggs,
And milk, yeah.
milk.
And canning was a big thing. I mean, we
Yeah.
canned everything there was possible.
Do you know if there are any other changes that were made because of the Depression, any other cutbacks, or mainly just the idea of being more self-reliant? It sounds like it's what came out of that.
I don't know about your church, but in our church in North Dakota, you had your one pair of overalls for church. And if you had striped overalls, that was dressed up. And you wore those, but that's all. Everybody had overalls.
Yeah.
There was no dress shirts or anything. It was just, everybody came with a clean pair of coats, that's all.
We always had bib overalls.
Yeah, bib overalls, yeah.
The dust storms, any stories about that you remember your parents talking about, or that again was starting in about 1933 apparently,
Yeah.
lasted, I don't know, several years as far as the drought, but any stories that you guys remember about that?
Pictures that Dad showed where the sand whipped up on the fence lines. Sometimes it was like,
Yeah.
drifts of
Like
snow.
snow, yeah.
It just looked like snow drifts up, but it was sand.
See, we had tumbleweeds, and when they were drought, they would break off and they'd roll into the fence. When they were in the fence, then the dust would come in and the way through the tumbleweeds and build them up. You build your fence to be under sand, and the cows would go over it.
Wow.
It was that thick?
I
Wow, you
know
could walk
my parents, I don't remember my parents talking about that, but I know that Marlene's dad and mom talked about, during those years, there were times where they had to wet handkerchiefs and put them on like bandanas,
Right.
in order to survive inside of the house.
Wow.
And they took
The
sheets,
dust was
partial
so
sheets,
thick.
and did the same thing inside the house. They would wet the sheets and hang them up like curtains to keep the dust from coming in the house.
I was going to ask about any special things they did to protect the food supply or the clothing besides what you mentioned.
I don't remember anything, do you?
I don't remember any of that,
Yeah.
no, not particularly.
Okay, I should know this, but they had refrigeration, they had the electricity, or we're talking about ice box?
No,
or-
we didn't have no ice box.
We had an ice box, but it was, you had to go to town to get a block of ice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And put it in there, and it would last a few hours, you know, maybe a couple of days.
How large is an ice box?
It'd be like a small refrigerator,
Okay.
like that.
A block of ice would be about like this.
Yeah, 100 pounds, I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
is usually.
How
what
much
they
for
got.
that?
How much money? Any idea?
don't remember that.
25, 30 cents for a block, I
Yeah,
think.
yeah.
it was.
How much would, how long would that block last?
Well, depends how
How
you-
many times you took the door and opened it up?
And you chip off of it, you know, if you needed for a drink, if you wanted some, otherwise,
Took an ice pick and chipped off a piece.
every other day at least you buy a block of ice.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Did they deliver it or you went and got
They
it?
deliver it.
So you could keep milk in there, I guess, some food.
Well,
I mean, that
milk was
the
a
idea.
daily thing, so we didn't
I
really
see.
keep milk
Yeah,
that
yeah.
way. Because we milked so many cows and stuff, we always had milk to
So it
drink.
was warm milk you drank?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Probably.
we drank
A
warm milk.
lot of that, some of the families had cisterns, and so they had these cranks, they could let their milk down in the, not into the water, but they would let it lower down where it was cool,
Yeah.
and then would crank it to bring it back up.
Yeah. It was so warm that butter would just be liquid. So we would lower it in the well, because our well was cold. And you lower it in the well and then it would come up and then you had cold butter. And a cold drink was, you wanted, that was the coldest we had.
What about, some places had grasshopper infestations, did you experience that or
We
hear
had
about
that.
that?
Yep,
Was that in the,
there was one year that I remember that the grasshoppers came in and it just got dark in the afternoon. When the grasshoppers came, it covered the sun up. And they ate everything that there was.
Everything, yeah.
Absolutely nothing left when they traveled.
was that a recurrent thing or just happened one time, do you know?
I remember it only a couple of times.
Occasional,
Yeah.
I would
Yeah,
say.
yeah,
But it was devastating when it came
yeah,
through.
yeah.
It was wipes out the crops. there's
The
no-
entire crop,
yeah.
there wasn't anything living left.
Yeah.
I think the biggest motivation that caused our folks to move from Mena, Oklahoma to Newton was because of, Dad said I couldn't make it. He had 2 or 3 farms and, the income off of that, I know my dad, even when they got to Newton, compared to what they do today, did not fertilize as near as heavy as they did now in today's economy. But, there wasn't much, if we ever raised a crop of wheat for 25 or 20 bushel an acre, that was a bumper crop. And so we had, I know for a number of years, we had watermelons. In the Blackjacks, we had 12 acres of watermelons. In the home place, we had 5 acres. And I know that you couldn't drive a semi in the watermelon patch in the Blackjacks because of the sand. So we shuttled them out with a pickup loads at a time, and packed them in a semi, and put straw between every watermelon.
Wow.
So those were hard times.
And just for comparison, you said 25 bushels per acre was a good crop.
Excellent crop.
Now it's 40 to 60,
Oh, and
something like
even
that.
more than that.
And how much per bushel, do you have any recollection that you would get out of it?
I'm thinking $1.10, somewhere in
It
there.
was less than that, I think, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I remember during the Depression, this is North Dakota, not Oklahoma, but Dad had 2 quarters of land that he was renting, and out of there was about 80 acres that was pasture. Out of the rest of it, he got 2 wagon loads of wheat, which is 140 bushels, and half a load of barley and half a load of oats. That meant about 3 bushels to the acre, and that's all he had.
Wow.
Half of the wheat we had to go to the owner of the land. The barley and the wheat he was able to keep for the feed for the cattle, but that was it. So that was very heavy. Pigs the sow would have litter and they'd kill half of them because they couldn't afford to feed them anyway. They just keep enough for butchering for the fall for their own selves. So there was no market for anything. It was just terrible.
Did your parents have cattle as well as dairy cattle?
Always cattle.
Always cattle,
Yeah, yeah.
plus crops.
Yeah.
We always butchered 2 big beef every
Per year.
fall after the first hard frost. And then 3 pigs.
Where did you keep the meat?
Yeah.
Well, you salted it down
That's right.
And put it
and you
in,
hung it in the granary
That's right.
by rope. You tied it through the leather part of or the skin part of the thing, and you hung it up there, lined
Did
it
your
up.
mother can meat?
Yeah, there was some of it was canned, That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
It was cooked in the big gropa, the big
Mir Europa.
copper kettle, and
With the wood fire outside?
a
you mean?
wood fire. Yeah, you built a fire underneath, and you cooked the meat, some of it, not all of it.
In quart
And then you
jars.
would can that, put that under a pressure cooker, can it. Yeah.
Were you gonna say something else?
I was
So how
gonna
long would the
say-
meat last when you hang it?
Oh,
You
all
salt-
year.
All year?
Oh, yeah.
It was
Yeah.
salted like
Some
that?
even was lowered into the
Salted,
wheat.
that would last
We
pretty
always
good.
called it sugar cured.
Yeah, it was,
It was heavily salted and it was added with,
there must have
sugar
been
cubes
some
with it.
sugar involved in that
Yeah,
too.
yeah,
I
yeah.
don't remember the mixture anymore or anything like that.
Go ahead.
My mom canned meat, also in jars, and then on Sunday, when we came home from church, and she might have invited somebody, and she'd get out a jar of the meat, and
Right,
had
right.
pieces of meat in it,
Yeah.
and that would be a quick meal.
In North Dakota, we had the advantage because we had an air-conditioned state.
Yeah, yeah.
So after the 1st of November, it would heat until the end of March because it was frozen outside all the time. So that helped us a lot.
So, did grocery stores exist?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah. We bought sugar.
Okay,
but
we
no
bought
credit.
Salt.
yeah.
No credit.
Yeah, no credit.
Or
We
credit
bought
cards.
Salt, sugar, what else?
Cans things or not?
No,
No, no.
nothing canned.
I don't know, very few.
There wasn't, I don't know that there was even canned stuff. Maybe there was, but we didn't know about it.
The man that bought our Oklahoma farm was Art McQuarrie. That was his name. And he run the grocery store. He owned and run the grocery store in Ringwood. This Art McQuarrie bought our farm. And a year later, when Dad went back to visit, Art McQuarrie said, "Mr. Smith," he said, "when does the farmer get his pay?" He was used to going when he wanted money to take it out of the cash register.
Yeah.
And when you're working on a farm, you might have the money from the sale of wheat, but you may not have a sale of wheat till next month or maybe next year. So he said, "When does the farmer get his pay?"
You bought groceries from eggs and milk, eggs and cream.
Yeah.
What you sold there, that's what you could spend in the grocery
I
store.
see.
That was all,
That's
yeah.
what my dad did.
I remember my mom coming home and saying, "I spent $5 today on groceries." That would have been like salt and sugar
Yeah,
and
right.
whatever we couldn't produce on the
Yeah,
farm.
yeah.
And she was appalled that she had to spend so much.
Finally, yeah, yeah.
Did Dad ever scold her for what she
Yeah.
spent?
I don't remember ever conversation about that.
I just wondered because she said that.
Yeah, she was appalled that she had to spend $5. And that was for an entire family. I mean, you know,
Ten.
How often did she go to the store?
not more than once a week,
That's
maybe,
right.
maybe every other week, I don't know. Something
Yeah,
like that.
and like Ted says, it was milk and eggs that were sold and
Traded for,
traded for other articles.
Yeah, yeah.
And then as far, getting back to the Dust Bowl, which again you may not remember, but any stories about how people kept cool or got cool at night or any way to do that? Yeah,
I know as kids, we slept outside sometimes,
really?
Yeah, yeah,
just because there was no air conditioning, there was
yeah.
nothing to cool you off.
Yeah, yeah.
Even in harvest, we would sleep on the truck bed while we were harvesting, you know, we'd sleep out there.
Almost through the nature of farm life, one question was switching over from horse plowing to tractors. Any idea when that happened, what era that was? Was
Yeah,
that before your time or?
I didn't learn to drive horses very much. I did a little bit with, when we had to go and pick up the bundles of grain
Yeah.
that were cut with a binder, you know, and shucked in the shucks. It was my job to drive. And Ben used to tell me, drive these things, you know, and I'd say, "Well, how do you want me to drive?" He said, "Drive right over the middle just like you have been." would drive right over the middle of the shocks.
We had no,
But he didn't really mean that.
Yeah, right,
That's
right,
what he
right,
thought I
right.
was doing.
Yeah.
So he said, just keep driving right over the middle, just like you have been.
now
Yeah.
this was a little, tricycle, front end tricycle, Ellis Chalmers. Then later on, we got, case tractors, and we had 3 case tractors. One was a small one for the baler, and, the other 2 were more for plowing and working the soil.
Well, that was long after though the horses went
Yeah.
out, yeah.
So horses went out, in your recollection, the
Yeah,
40s sometime,
about-
or?
Well, we still had a couple of horses that we brought up from Oklahoma, and those were the last. I mean, we didn't renew them. I mean, we didn't get any more.
Yeah, yeah.
So 47, 48, somewhere in there.
Ted, any-
My dad traded in 6 horses, and I think he paid $600 for the first rubber tire tractor, and that was a beauty. And we got rid of the horses, except we had one team for doing the stuff around the yard, but
Right.
we traded in 6 horses for the tractor.
Main crop that you had, 30s and 40s,
Wheat.
wheat was wheat.
Nothing else but wheat.
Same in North Dakota. Nothing else but wheat.
Yeah.
So you'd have one opportunity to make money that year, except for the eggs and chickens.
And then later on, he planted barley and oats.
And oats, yeah.
That came in Kansas that I remember. I don't know about
Yeah, yeah.
Oklahoma. I don't remember that.
Corn, we planted, some corn, like 25 acres on the south side, remember, along the south side of corn, on the south side of our farmstead.
We had oats.
That was,
Go ahead.
sorry, that was planted with a 2-row planter.
Oh, yeah.
Now
Wait.
they have a 30-row planter to go through the field.
We couldn't raise corn in North Dakota, but we had oats for the horses and the chickens, and barley for the pigs, and then the wheat was for profit. That was it.
Or flour
And flour, yeah,
for
yeah, for
grinding
eating,
for
yeah,
your bread.
for eating, yeah,
for your bakery.
Yeah.
Because we ran a home bakery
that's right.
Wow.
every day, or
Okay.
almost
Yeah.
every
Yeah,
day.
we did too.
Do you ever recall a time when you didn't have enough to eat?
No, never.
I
No,
don't think so.
Not really. Didn't have that.
we also had something, yeah.
We didn't always eat what we wanted,
Yeah.
And we didn't eat as much
but
as
we always had
wanted.
something to eat.
Let's see. Typical meal.
Meat and potatoes.
Meat and
Not many
potatoes.
vegetables.
And vegetable, if you had the garden up, or when company come, then you open a can of beans or whatever, then but otherwise, we didn't always have that. We ate a lot of wild rabbit.
Really? Wow.
That was good.
We had, I remember fried eggs for breakfast.
Yeah, a
with
lot of
some
eggs.
Potatoes,
Mhm.
probably every morning.
Coffee?
Always.
Coffee?
Folks had coffee, I don't think any of the boys.
I don't
did.
remember any coffee on
No,
the table.
Dad and Mom had coffee, the rest of us didn't.
How did they heat the house in the winter?
Wood.
A pot-bellied stove in the corner.
Cold. Yeah.
Every Saturday, we had to go out and cut hedge wood.
Oh, corn cobs.
I have proof that like we cut with an axe, we cut wood. That's
Split it.
proof.
Zero.
Will was trying to split a log when he hit that one.
Yeah. Cut this one off and that one we sewed back on.
And what year did the single wood stove go out? I mean, that you went to something more modern.
Well, it was still there on the farm, when I left home in, 61.
There was no electricity on the farm in Newton nor in Oklahoma until till spring of 48, I think is
Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
when the R8
47, there was no, we marched there, there was no electricity in the place, March, April, May through December. So I think it was early in 48 that we got electricity on the farm for in the house.
I heard
But
you-
in Oklahoma, we had the 24-volt wind charger.
Hmm.
Charge the batteries. You know, they talk about solar as being a new thing. Well, this was a wind charger charging the same kind of a battery
yeah.
to run your lights in the house. And,
That was all the time you were growing up. You had that.
yeah, yeah. The only time you didn't have a light in the house at night was when the batteries didn't get charged, you didn't have enough wind
The
to
wind.
charge the batteries.
If the wind was down and the wind charger did not run, we did not have lights.
Did you always have Wi-Fi and internet? See, what appliances did you use to cook?
Wood
Uh,
stove.
Wood stove.
Wood stove,
stove,
kitchen stove,
Yep.
kitchen
Yeah.
range.
Yep.
You fed the wood stove, you know.
I heard you mention REA or RECA.
REA,
REA,
Rural Electric Association.
Yeah, and was that a private thing or was it government
It's like
subsidy?
West
It's a
Star
cooperative.
A
It was
cooperative just by
cooperative.
private funding,
Right.
you think
Yeah,
it
I
wasn't a
think so.
government
Yeah.
project? And that happened in, again, late 40s?
Yeah, well, when we moved, there was nothing there indicating, but we heard that there was gonna be some,
Mhm.
and then during the next months, they came by with poles, left them along in the ditch, and then came along and one by one, put them in, and,
You don't know if it was 110 or what voltage it was?
oh yeah, it was 110.
110,
Oh, yeah.
60 hertz?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Current, okay. When did you get running water indoors?
Hmm.
You ran and carried it in.
Yeah, you ran and carried
That's coming.
it in. You ran for it. I
I'd
would
say-
say,
Maybe May, June of that 1947. It was not right away because we built that little addition, put the bathroom in the house and a storm cellar under the bathroom.
Yeah,
well, we didn't have running water before we had electricity.
That's right.
yeah.
So it was sometime in 48, we ran a pipe up to the kitchen, but there was no bathroom. We still had the wash tub every Saturday night, whether we
Bad.
needed it or not.
And
One
you-
was
and you-
rinsing and one was washing with soap in it.
Is that right?
And how many got in it? Before
Well,
you changed
you gotta
that
get
change?
in first. That way you didn't have any problems. If you were toward the end, there might be a little scum around the edge.
Was there a set sequence or just whoever got there first?
I think
Well, the
so.
kids usually got in the first.
Yeah.
The
And
kids.
then Monday morning, when mom got through washing, we had to carry out those big tubs of water and it had a handle on each side like you know it would. And we'd say, act like a man, act like a man, act like an electric man. Each one grabbed his hand and went out the door with it and dumped it out.
So your mom washed once a week?
Once a week.
Yeah, yeah.
Monday morning was wash day.
That's right.
Tuesday morning was
Ironing.
ironing. Wednesday, help me. One day for each thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Down the line.
Wednesday mending.
Mending.
Friday was usually the day for going to town if they went to town.
Yeah.
Washing clothes with what kind of detergent?
Well, we made our own soap.
Yeah.
Made your own soap?
Made a lye soap, yeah, yeah.
How do you do that?
How did we do that?
Yeah,
Lye,
After butchering, we'd keep the fat from the hogs
Okay.
Right,
and the
right.
cow.
and you add lye, and you add, I don't know what else, but there
Yeah.
was 2 or 3
Big
ingredients.
tub.
Big
like
ones are
this.
3 foot in diameter
Wow.
with a big long paddle, like a canoe paddle, and you stirred that for hours with a little amount of heat in there until you made soap. And that
Till
soap
it
was,
got hard, till it got hard.
Huh.
And then once it
And
dried
you cut
out,
it at
then
the
you
knife.
cut it into bars,
That's right.
and that's what you use.
wow. Haircuts. When did that happen and how often and who did it? And
haircuts, for me, I don't think I ever went to Newton in town until I was, I'm gonna say 13 or 14 years of age. And I can remember when I went to town, bought the first pair of shoes, and I think Dad bought shoes for 3 or 4 people. And when he told the clerk how many boys he had, he just kind of threw up his hand and said, how in the world could you ever afford to buy for 8 boys shoes?
No,
A lot of patches on.
yeah,
On shoes.
patches.
Yeah.
Oh,
Trading
yeah,
them
one
in.
day was for patching. That's right.
That's right, yeah.
One day was Mom dedicated to just
Sewing
sewing
and
up the
patching
knees
and buttons and.
and the backside and everything that got torn off.
So, yeah, good.
I can add, for Evelyn and Leroy's wedding, Aaron was the candle lighter because he had the best suit in the family.
The fitting. So store-bought clothing versus homemade,
Oh, well, she made a lot of our stuff. We didn't buy anything except overalls.
overalls, huh?
And those were patched and patched.
Yeah.
Hand me down, hand me down.
Yeah,
You don't have any idea what they cost by any chance?
no.
Yeah.
But they were handed down, like Aaron says, they were handed down from one brother to the next to the brother of the brother.
Till they were completely wore out, yeah.
Yeah.
I remember one set that I hated in the worst way because they had 4 buttons across the back here that you opened up.
You called it a
flap.
clop.
That was the clop you opened up.
Yes.
Yes.
When you went to the outhouse, you opened the clop.
And when there was one button missing, then then you had trouble.
Which leads next to my next question is the outhouse. When did the outhouse go out and you got indoor?
When you got running water.
Yeah, after
So
we had
they-
wintering water.
Like,
You know, it was
Late
some years
48.
before we actually got a bathtub.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Late
it was,
48.
even
in the
after we had
50s, yeah.
running water.
how about the shoes? Did the kids have shoes the year round or did you go barefoot in the summer?
Oh,
Oh.
was that even a question? Mom said, you can't have your shoes off until there's no R in the month. So March was out, April was out, May 1st, the shoes
Barefoot,
came off
yes.
and they didn't go on till September.
Really?
Except Sundays, we had to wear shoes to church.
Yeah.
And you know how hard it was to get shoes on after walking barefoot with calluses and so on your feet during the day, I mean, all summer long, and then trying to stomp those shoes on. And of course, after church, we didn't wait till we got home to get them off. We took them off in the car on the way home.
We had a 41 blue Ford, and I can remember the car was full, and the 2 older boys sat on the front 2 bumpers, the fenders.
No kidding.
And some of the older boys walked ahead to get there on time until the rest of us could drive in the car. And so the back seat must have had, I don't know how many in.
Who was assigned to do the walking?
Oh, I think that was a voluntary basis.
So,
I do remember one experience that I had that was life-changing. I got forgotten at a funeral.
Oh, dear.
We went as a family to this Mino church, little church there outside of town. And I don't know whose funeral it was, but after the funeral, everybody kind of disappeared and left, and I was left standing there.
Oh, my.
I was probably 4, maybe 5, somewhere in there, and I was left. And the family went home. They didn't miss me till they got home, and then realized Laverne wasn't there. So then they came back for me. But, you know, when you're layered up inside of the car, nobody missed you.
That's right.
Come on.
No seat belts.
Huh?
no seatbelts.
belts.
Well, they didn't know
No
what a
seatbelts,
seatbelt
no.
was.
We were at least 2 deep.
So you were back discussing with the teachers of the law, right?
Teachers.
Like Jesus. You were back discussing with them. That's okay.
They
With
had left
the
too.
elders.
Yeah. Briefly, how was Sunday school and church different than today? Just 1 or 2 thoughts on that. Did they have Sunday school?
Yes,
For
Oh,
kids?
sure.
Sure.
And
I was on, the curtain was here and the curtain was here on top of the stage. And I had my Sunday school, Marjorie Wadle was my teacher. And she would teach us, and I don't know, the rest of the adults were in the auditorium.
mm,
Did they were the men still in German? And the women in German?
I do not remember. As far as I remember, they were all in English.
Our classes were men and women still had German classes. The rest of us had English classes, but the adults still had German classes.
Okay.
Yeah.
They sat on different sides of the church,
yes,
I know
yeah.
that.
Really?
Women on
Oh,
one
yeah, the
side.
women was one on one side.
Women
Still
and
had foot
girls.
washing,
Yes, yeah.
How often was that?
once a quarter maybe.
How did they do that? I
Well-
mean, besides washing feet, everyone was participating in that, or?
Yeah.
The women, of course,
were
are on one
with-
side and the
with
men on the
women.
other side. Yeah, yeah.
Women with women, you turn to the person next to you, you had a wash basin, and you washed
And a
their
pitcher,
feet,
yeah.
and then they turned around and they washed your feet.
In Oklahoma, in Ringwood, Oklahoma, where we were there, the last time we went was last year, in the Mino Church, the wash basins in the pulpit that had in the West New Hopedale Church, close to our house, was still in that church. It's still there, and I think today, I'm sure it's there, and the foot washing pans and stuff are still in this little cages behind the
Yeah.
glass.
I have a foot washing pan from our church, yeah.
Fairly universal, it sounds like. I mean, is it?
In
Well,
well,
I
it
think
was-
most Mennonite churches.
Yeah,
Most
Mennonite
Mennonite
churches,
churches,
yeah, yeah.
it was a part of that.
Yeah.
I went to Mount
We
Lake.
only, go ahead.
I was in Mountain Lake, Minnesota, and we had that too
Really?
in our church.
And that
Foot
was-
washing the women,
What brand of?
Mennonite.
That was Mennonite
It was
also.
evangelical Mennonite. brother.
We only had communion once a year. That's on Easter time, and that's when we had our foot washing time at that time, yeah.
I
I don't
think-
remember the
don't
foot
think it
washing.
was
I know that
long.
it was done. I think it was more of the adults rather than.
Oh, yeah,
more of
the kids, we didn't get involved
Yeah,
with, but
the
I
kids
still
didn't.
remember them doing it with the men, yeah.
Any questions been thought of from our vast audience here?
So did the young kids sit with the ladies until a certain age?
Yep, the boys sat with the men, the women sat with the.
But
Is
as
that
far, as
the
far as the
advice?
real young
Yeah.
kids, did they sit, like the boys that sit with the mothers for a while until they got to a certain age?
Well, when they were babies, I mean, when they needed to be, if they, well, yeah, then they sat on the women's side. Otherwise, we boys always sat from about, first grade on, we boys sat together in the front. And then, smaller than that, they maybe sat with their mother, but, and I don't remember any children sitting with the dads. But, when they were big enough to sit with the boys on this side and the girls on that side, then that was it. You were grown up, you know, a little bit better, yeah.
I remember sitting with Dad,
Do you?
growing up, yeah. On the men's side, of
Men's
course.
side.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Dad, he asked you before if there were other ways you made money, and I know from reading over the summer that Grandpa sent you to hay for other people.
Yeah,
When did he do that?
Well, we bought a hay baler, and a wire tie, it took 3 men to run the thing. One guy to punch the wires through, one guy to tie the wires, one guy to drive the tractor. And we did that as for ourselves, but also to buy custom baling.
We wore out 2 case hand tires, and then we bought a third one, which was a Massey Ferguson. It was a string hand, it was an automatic tire.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Yeah, it was automatic sometimes. Sometimes you got halfway through the field and you looked back and it was just dumping it back out the
Yeah,
backside.
yeah.
And those knotters, those fingers went around and pulled that knot, but sometimes it didn't pull the knot.
I'll give you a comparison. It works just like a computer does today. It works perfectly, but when it doesn't work, it doesn't work.
Doesn't work, yeah. We had, in North Dakota, we had WPA.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a did you have that as well?
Oh, yeah.
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 The
Which
farmers,
stands for Works Project Administration, I think.
the nickname was We Poke Along.
Oh.
But they would in North Dakota, they were building roads with shovels. They had bigger equipment, I'm sure, but then all the men had shovels and they would use it to build it, stuff like, and that provided some income for them.
I think our brother Frank built roads
I went out that, yeah.
somewhere in North Dakota.
Good.
My dad did in Minnesota.
Yeah, he was involved in that.
Yeah.
The outhouses that we had in Oklahoma were built by the WPA.
Is that right?
Yeah. It was a two-holder, it was modern.
But it was,
When we got to Newton, we had to build our own.
But we
Dad-
built a two-holder too.
I think you're
Yeah,
right.
we did.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
Dad told the story of all of our little church was we maybe had 5, 6 families, and the men all worked together on the road work. And it was coming Sunday. We didn't have church in our church because it was Harvest Festival, so we were invited to the neighbor's church. And so the foreman said, "You got to work on Sunday," and the men said, "No, we're not going to work on Sunday." Well, Dad went to church over there, and the pastor said, "How come there's no men from your church?" Well, Dad said, "I don't know, because we were only come." Well, the next morning he was going to go to work, and he was going to pick up the first guy, and he came out from home, and he said, "We all went to work yesterday, and we're fired." Dad said, "Well, I'll go pick up my shovel anyway." So he went to the workplace, and the boss wasn't there, so he picked up his shovel, started working, and the boss came along, and he said, Dad said, "Well, I suppose I better turn in my shovel." He said, "No, I'm going to make you a manager." So the other guys all got fired because they worked on Sunday, and
Yeah.
Dad didn't work on Sunday, and he got promoted. So that was a testimony in our community.
Yeah. So WPA, for those who might be watching this in the future, was a government program to put people to work.
Right,
Who
right,
didn't
right.
have a job, basically.
It was like the soup kitchen, but it was better.
Yeah,
It made work for people who didn't
Yeah.
have a job.
yeah. And any ideas what the wage was? I mean, you probably wouldn't be aware of that, but,
No,
yeah.
Cents per dollar. I mean, it wasn't,
Mhm.
I don't think it was even $1
a day maybe?
For thrashing at that time was $1 a day.
Mhm.
From early morning till late at night, it was $1.
Which reminds me, the wheat harvest, was that a community affair, or you had enough siblings on your farm to do it all yourself?
We did most of it ourselves, as far as binding it
And
and
shocking.
shucking it. But when it came to thrashing, it was a
That was
community
community,
thing.
yeah.
You invited your neighbors and friendschaft, your relatives all around, to come on a particular day that you did your harvest, and then on a particular day you went to their thing.
Yeah.
and did
Forgive me,
theirs.
but what's thrashing? Is that getting rid of the?
The old thrash machine
I
had a
don't know
great
what a
big
thrashing
blower.
machine is.
Sorry.
A thrashing machine is like a combine, only it's stationary.
Yeah, yeah.
There's a conveyor belt or a conveyor
A big
chain
feeder chain.
Yeah.
that fed it into the hopper or into the, and there was, like.
Knives that cut the
knives
twine
that
off.
cut the twine and cut kind of the bundles down
And
as
then
it
you-
went in.
Yeah. Then you had a big cylinder
Big cylinder that went,
with teeth that just thrashed it all to pieces.
Okay.
And
Then
walkers in the back.
You
they
would
call
go
it.
through over the
shakers,
sieve,
shakers, yeah.
and the wheat would drop down below there and come up to an elevator into the truck.
Right.
And the straw would shake over to the end and go into the blower and into a stack. So that was a big
Yeah.
a
So that,
thrash machine.
that process was the community-wide thing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
usually was a
Yeah.
community thing.
One
Yeah.
time, I remember at Newton, we had a half section to plow. And we had this LA case tractor, and we plowed a half section from Monday morning at 4 a.m. We started the plowing from the south end, and we plowed the whole section. And by Saturday noon, 1 o'clock Saturday, we were done. We plowed around the clock, nonstop, for one solid week. We had the truck out in the field. We had some mattresses in there. In the truck, the LA case ran 4 hours on a tank of gas. And so there was usually 4 boys, as I remember, would 3 would sleep and 1 would drive tractor, and when you got, the tank was empty, you got the next guy got on and kept going. And we plowed around the clock for one solid week.
Wow.
Four plows, 14 inches.
4 bottoms.
4 bottom plow, 14 inches. So you what, 4, 3's 12, 52 inches at a swath.
Right.
And that's a lot of ground.
Was there a deadline that you had to do it all in 1 week? Or what was
No, that was just a personal
the-
challenge
Oh, okay.
that they wanted to prove something, I don't know. We had people coming by, driving by, looking, because it was a community phenomenon.
Did you get the TV station people come
No,
out?
there was no TV. There was no
True
TV.
story.
There was no electricity. We would take and cut through the field. The field was so big and half a mile long that we would take and step off 75 steps, and somebody stand there, and then we'd go on the other end of half a mile and step off 75 steps and hang a bucket on top of the
Oh, yeah.
on top of the post. And then we started here, and we'd look at that bucket, and we'd keep driving all the way through till we got there. It gave us a nice straight. We didn't have any
GPS.
GPS.
And if you had a crooked furrow, you were ashamed of it.
Yeah.
And we
That's
practiced,
right.
we
You had to make
practiced
that straight.
exactly what the Bible says. No man putting his hand to the plow and looking
looks
back
back,
is
you mess
fit
it up.
for the kingdom. So if you did that and you looked back and see how you was plowing, you could see when you got to the end, exactly where you made the crook.
Going back to the threshing machine,
Yeah.
you'd have an entrepreneur who would own the machine, and another guy with a tractor, they'd go together, and then any farmer, when you were, if we're gonna plow, if we're gonna thresh for you, you would provide a team of horses and a man to run the rack. So that's how they brought the grain in. But the entrepreneur then had run the tractor and the machine, and they made some money out of it, so that's how that was worked, yeah.
My grandpa had a ring. He
Yeah,
had the
my dad had
threshing-
one too, yeah.
Threshing machine.
We had a thrash machine in Oklahoma, and it has steel wheels on it.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
And they converted the back two wheels into rubber truck tires, and they took off the wheels on the front and put it on the back of the truck, and they bolted it to the truck like a semi, and we came right down Wichita, right down Broadway with a
Wow.
and when we moved, we came through there with all 250 head of chickens, cows. They all came right down Broadway.
They looked like Beverly Hillbillies.
We were the modern version.
All right, any other questions or?
But
any
the
other-
women would always do cooking and cook for the whole.
Oh, yes, yeah, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the cooking
Bring
was always.
food to the field. Oh, yeah.
We did the same thing with the butchering as we did with the
Right.
harvesting.
Okay.
Right, right, yeah,
That
yeah.
was a-
Whenever you were going to butcher that much meat, you had to have somebody to be able to know how to cut that all up and process it.
And you always
So
send a
It
good
was a
chunk of,
community thing.
yeah. And you always send a good chunk of meat back home with them as a
Oh, yeah,
honor,
sure.
yeah, yeah.
Can we add one more story?
Yeah, sure.
Pete Eck, who was a friend to Leroy, well, his
No,
son,
Otto.
his son, lived east of Newton by, what do you call that little place?
McLean.
McLean.
or- yeah,
That's where
McLean.
our home
Oh, yeah.
place, house is now situated. They
That's
moved
right.
it from off of our property
That's
to
right.
McLean.
Oh, really?
Well,
I didn't
Otto
know that.
lived at McLean, and that's where Pete Eck, the dad, lived. And Pete Eck had two sons, Otto and Marvin. And Marvin was a school teacher, and he taught in Wichita. Well, Pete Eck raised the hogs, and he was so, the hogs were a pet to him, and he would not damage them hogs for anything, so he'd ask Otto, not Otto,
No,
the other
Marvin.
one, Marvin, to do the shooting.
He'd go hide, wasn't he?
Pete Eck went around the corner of the barn, and he would peek and Marvin, that's not the right name, but his name
No.
started with M. No. Anyway, he had a single shot. Well, it had a clip that had
Bolt
10
action.
Bolt action had 10 in it, 10 bullets in it. Pete Eck stood around the corner and looked, and Marvin went out to the hog, and the hog got real close, and he stuck it in, bang! He missed the hog and shot him through the ear. The hog would run around and start to bleed, and he shot him through the second shot, he shot him through the nose. Next time he shot him, and shot him again, shot him through the eyes, and he could not stop that hog. Finally, the old man, Pete Eck, around the corner of the barn, when he run out of clips, out of 10 shots, and the hog was still squealing around the yard. Pete Eck hollered, and here's what he said. He said, "Albert, put more shells in." He ran out of shells and said, Albert was his name.
Well, after a while, I saw on one occasion, I don't know if that's the one you're talking about, where they actually threw the hog down and slit his throat with a knife, because he couldn't hit it.
Pete said, Albert, put more shells in. All you needed is some more shells.
Well,
I
thank
learned
you.
most about my brother Ben, but that hog could have been out there behind that truck there, and my brother Ben, he could have shot that hog from this distance with one shot. But Albert
good
couldn't
shot,
hit that
yeah.
hog.
Albert couldn't do it.
Oh, my.
Well, thank you very much for your recollections.
Those were